Good evening, everybody. My name is Bert Dicht. I am Managing Director of Membership for the National Space Society. And on behalf of my colleague Larry Ahern, Vice President of Chapters, I'd like to welcome you to our town hall this evening, NSS Space Policy and the March Storm. So again, welcome to our town hall. This is the first one of 2024. Like last week was the first space forum that we've held in 2024. So we hope to have a number of town halls over the course of the year, focusing in on different aspects of NSS. Just as a reminder, town halls are more internal about what is happening with NSS, our programs and projects, whereas space forums are more about technology, history, what's happening in the space program. So just so you get an idea when you see an invite and the difference when you get that. Our agenda, we'll just discuss virtual etiquette as we always do. I have a few NSS announcements to talk about. Then I'll talk a little bit about upcoming space forums and town halls. We'll get right into the program, and then we'll close out for the evening. As always with our virtual etiquette, it's best to submit a question using the Q&A function. We did get a lot of questions that were submitted beforehand. I know our speaker is going to try to address some of those in the presentation, but others will be able to draw on at the end. Should you have any questions as we go along, again, feel free to use the Q&A, but you can also use the chat function. As always, we just ask you be respectful of all the panelists here and the audience itself, because everyone can see them. I will say this, it's a little easier to pull the questions out of the Q&A because in chat, there are other comments and things that are always put in there as well. As always, too, if you are appreciating and enjoying this type of programming, our space forums and town halls, we ask that you donate to support NSS. I would like to call out a number of people did donate last week, so thank you for doing that. I will put this link into the chat so you have it. So thank you in advance for doing that. And again, thank everybody for your support of NSS throughout our programming year, and also for being a member of NSS. We also have a post-town hall survey. Take a few minutes to complete that. And once it'll pop up once you exit the session. The survey is anonymous, and your feedback will help us in planning future events. I would like to remind everybody about the upcoming ISDC. It's going to be a really great ISDC. The theme is No Limits in Space. It will be held in Los Angeles, May 23rd to 26th. That is Memorial Day weekend at the Sheraton Gateway. A lot of great topic areas and great speakers. I know you remember we had Alan Stern on our space forum, and he is going to be at the ISDC. Jose Hernandez, who's gotten a lot of press recently, he's the astronaut who actually tried to become an astronaut almost 10 times and was finally selected, and they made a great movie about his life. So he will be there. Another shuttle astronaut, Susan Kilrain, will be there. So we hope you can join us. It's going to be a lot of fun. And the registration is now open, and you can also make hotel reservations as well. So I will put the link for the ISDC into the chat also. Last week, you remember we invited you to a special event at the Kennedy Space Center, kind of a launch event. And this was made possible by one of our board members, Chantel Meyer. Chantel is the founder and CEO of the company ForSpace, and she has been involved in developing an art project with artist Jeff Koons called Moon Phases. And in fact, her company designed a container that these Moon Phases globes would be put into and then sent to the moon on the IM-1 mission. This is the Nova-C lunar lander that Intuitive Machines designed. And the launch was actually yesterday, or I should say this morning at 1:05 a.m. We were all out at the Banana Creek viewing site to watch the launch. It was actually scrubbed by one day. And the day before, we had a big event at the Hilton Cocoa Beach. And we had astronaut Winston Scott, we had astronaut Nicole Stott, and a great team of students from Embry-Riddle University who designed what's called the Eagle Cam. The Eagle Cam will be ejected from the Nova C lander and actually take pictures of the lander as it record video of the lander as it lands on the surface of the moon. So it was a really exciting time for us. But I really want to shout out to Chantel because she has now a payload that's going to the moon. That is really exciting. We had a fabulous time. Weather was perfect this early this morning, and watch for this over the course of the next week. It's scheduled to land on the moon on the 22nd next week. So hopefully there'll be a lot more updates. Obviously, there are a lot of things that have to go right in order to make sure it lands successfully. But more than 200 NSS members, students, and space enthusiasts were at the launch event and witnessed this historic mission. They said that obviously as they're promoting this, we have not landed anything. The United States has not landed anything on the moon since Apollo 17. So this would be our first attempt since that time. Well, I should say Astrobotic actually tried it earlier this year as well and didn't make it. So it just shows you how hard it is to do it. The Russians failed recently as well. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and watch for a great result as Nova C makes its attempt to land on the moon. But again, let's shout out to our board member, Chantel, on a job well done. Upcoming space forums and town halls, we're still working on a number of things, as I mentioned last week. I hope to have a much more detailed schedule when we do the next space forum on March 7th with Jim Plaxico. That's going to be maximizing your solar eclipse experience, which again will be on April 8th. And we have a planned town hall for the 11th of April to talk about the ISDC. And we do hope to have several speakers from ISDC who will be showcasing what they'll be talking about at the ISDC. So look forward to that. But you can see we've got a lot of great people in the queue. It's just a matter of getting confirmations and getting schedules worked out. So we're looking forward to that. I'd like to now, before going through the program, again, I always like to welcome our CEO, Anita Gale, who's with us tonight. Anita, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, I would. So glad that we were able to offer this member benefit, or this benefit to members, having the town halls and the space forums. One of my favorite things. And tonight, I'm not going to take much time because you're going to be hearing about one of the most important things that NSS does. I often get asked, what does NSS do? What's important about NSS? And always on my list is that NSS actually does influence policy in Washington, D.C. And John is going to tell you how we do that. So looking forward to what you say, John. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Anita.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. It's going to be very easy. And we've got a friendly audience, you know that. So it's my pleasure to introduce our program for this evening. As we said, it is we're going to introduce NSS Space Policy, the Policy Committee, and talk a little bit about the March storm. So our speaker tonight is Jonathan Dagle. Jonathan is a technologist, a futurist, a strategist. He's a retired Air Force officer, brings a lot of diverse experience to this position. He currently serves as the policy chair for the NSS and the Planetary Defense Policy Lead for the National Space Society. You might remember John did a space forum for us last year on some of those issues. So John, it's great to have you this evening. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn this over to you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Bert. Appreciate the introduction. And without any ado, I will get right into the program. So we're going to talk about policy tonight. It's very wonky, perhaps, but I imagine that's why most of you have joined us. Throughout the presentation, you may notice a QR code up in the corner, and that is the QR code that takes you to the web page where you can learn about March Storm and register. You can't actually register on that page. You have to click through to yet another page where you register. And like last year, there's sort of a two-part registration. Um, this is not maybe the easiest, but anyway, it's what we're working with this year. So it worked fine last year. Once everyone understood there were two parts. So just keep clicking through until you reach the point where you have actually registered, and then there will be a second site where a registration. I think it is phrased as a donation to support the March Storm activities is requested, because the first form can't collect the money. That's the bottom line. All right, so without any more ado, let's go. So I'm gonna tell you how we're working to advance your goals. Right? Okay, this is you know who I am. All right, I am going to tell you about how policy works at NSS, who we work with to develop our policies, what we did last year, what we're doing now, and what you can do. So let's go. Notice the QR code. All right, so the policy committee is sort of the nexus of policy activity at the NSS. Why is that? It's established in the bylaws. Specifically says the policies committee is responsible for determining the positions of the society on legislative items and a strategy through which to promote these positions. What does that mean? That means that the policy committee has a purview over anything that's going on in Congress, treaties, federal regulation, executive orders, state legislation. Those are all specifically addressed in the bylaws. But you can basically think of the policy committee is the government relations arm of NSS. That's what it is called. In many nonprofits have a director or vice president of government relations, and that's what the policy committee is doing. The other area that the policy committee is specifically tasked with is generating legislative action, and so we translate that into advocacy. And so that is the important element where both we are involved with advocacy here more directly in Washington and engage with the leadership, but we also need your support, and we want to organize you a little better to support the goals of NSS. More about that later. So in case you aren't unaware, the policy committee is chaired by me. How did I get here? I was appointed by the executive vice president when it was Jeremy Wainscoat. The policy chair is approved by the executive committee. I don't get to just be here without any endorsement or review. And then I nominate a committee of at least 8 people, and many of these people have been the people who were here long before I was. And so they have continued to be nominated because of their position, their expertise, etc., experience. And those are also reviewed by the executive committee and then approved. Normally about 2 years on the policy committee. Many people have had subsequent terms, but that's sort of your initial commitment. Those people that are on the executive committee, and there currently are 12, which is an odd number because somebody dropped off and hasn't been replaced yet. But anyway, those 12 people are what is called for in the bylaws as the policy committee, and they are the voting members of the committee. So there are other actors in the policy realm, and that includes the policy leadership team, which are the people that meet regularly and are actively working on policy issues. So developing strategy or developing actual positions, writing letters, etc. That group meets every other week right now, and that I chair that as well. We have instituted a group called Policy Leads, And there are currently 4 policy leads. And there you see that each one has a policy area. And the purpose of this individual is to serve as sort of the subject matter expert on an issue. Whenever a policy issue comes up, that is the person that you go to, depending on, if it's in their area of expertise. And then they also are supposed to have the lead in developing policies, the policy that NSS, would pursue. There is a fifth named, position called the advocacy manager. And through a very unfortunate situation, we lost our advocacy manager because of he had some personal issues and had to resign about 3 months after we hired him. So we are in a search for an advocacy manager to replace Quentin, who had to step away. And you may see more about that in another venue soon. But if anybody has an interest in that, we'll get to that later. I'll talk more about that later. And then finally, there is sort of the Greater Policy Committee group, which is, we might, in the military, we might refer them as graybeards, but it's basically a lot of NSS people who have been involved in policy, who have been involved in sort of government relations, perhaps not at NSS, but other places. And these are sort of the brain trust of people that are consulted on policy matters and generally provide input. But are distinguished from the actual voting members, which there are only 12 of right now. Okay, so who do we work? We don't just do this in a vacuum. We actually work with some other organizations. And the primary way that we do this is through the Alliance for Space Development. ASD was founded in approximately 2015. I believe that's the first year they had an actual event and moved forward. The group was founded by NSS and the Space Frontier Foundation. And so we are the executive board that drives the Alliance for Space Development's agenda. The real purpose is to leverage NSS and Space Frontier on common items and basically to organize March Storm, first of all, but then also to help advocate, help to promote our engagement on Capitol Hill at other times of the year, as we will discuss soon. There are 16 members now of ASD. So we grew two members in the last year. One was the International Space Elevator Consortium, and the other is the U.S. Space Force Association. So that's pretty significant because we had lost 2 members in the past, one basically organizations that were defunct. Anyway, so this is a good sign because the more people that we represent, the more people we can speak on behalf of and gain representation on Capitol Hill. So that's what we do, and of course, then we do March Storm. Other partners that we work through or work with, just as NSS, include the AIAA, as it is called. We are participants in their Cislunar Ecosystem Task Force, which is an organization that is trying to establish the conditions necessary to have, when I say an ecosystem, what they're really talking about is an economy, a business-to-business economy in cislunar space, so that the only activity is not funded by governments, so that there are companies can offer services and products such as communications or precision navigation and timing, or landers, or a fuel depot, perhaps at one point, other resources that would be available on the moon, or in cislunar space as well. Anyway, so that's an exciting opportunity, which we've joined last year. We work with the SEDS, the Students for Exploration and Development of Space. And so this is a group of college students that's internationally organized. We work primarily with the USA, or SEDS USA organization. We work with them in a variety of ways, but then we also get their support in March Storm as well. Even the Planetary Society. So 2 years ago, we authored a letter, or we will together with the Planetary Society, we authored a letter to Congress, calling on them to stop screwing around with the funding for NEO-Surveyor and to get NASA on board so that we could meet the goals of the George E. Brown Near Earth Object Survey Act, which was to locate 90% of the large-ish and dangerous near Earth objects. Anyway, so we've done that. We worked with them on some other projects. We've talked with them about letters to the Hill, and we generally coordinate what we're doing with them, even though their interests are really much more science focused than ours. And then finally, the Beyond Earth Institute is an organization that is trying to be sort of a think tank. We've worked with them they have an annual conference. We've had people on panels at their conferences, at their event rather, and we generally work with them to see what their position is. They don't drive the train, but it's good when you can get more organizations advocating the same position because it is more likely to be listened to on the Hill. So what did we do last year? This is a great question, isn't it? So we had a March storm last year, and the three things that we said were most important were to extend the learning period on human commercial space launch for another 8 years. That learning period was going to expire on the 1st of October in 2023. And I guess we can say we had success because it was extended. It was only extended until the end of the calendar year, but then it was extended again, and now it will run out in 2 weeks. So it's going to go through, I believe, the 1st of March. So we're still fighting that battle. We were focused on promoting the idea of a clean energy, a space solar power demonstration, which has been a cornerstone of March Storm for some years. We didn't get that, but we got something, which we'll talk about later. We tried to get more funding for NEO-Surveyor since it had been cut for 2 years in a row. And that all sort of didn't happen because there was no budget. So when there's no budget, you can't fund programs that are new at a higher level. They usually just get the early whatever funding, some function of the funding that they had in the last approved budget. So anyway, that was difficult. But then we had secondary objectives, and actually most of these got pretty good support. Commercial LEO destinations was thought to be somewhat in danger for the past 2 years. It seems that it's not really in danger anymore. It seems like it's on track. The HLS, I'll mention, there was some concern about funding the 2 different lander alternatives. That doesn't seem to be an issue now. Gateway had some funding issues. And then the area that we brought into this, which really needs attention and we have not been successful at, is the ISRU research and development, which is in the NASA STMD directorate. And there are some definite feelings on the Hill that this money is not being well spent, some of it. And the other problem is that there are, in spite of the end of earmarks have not ended. And so NASA is directed to take some of this money and do research that is not originally planned. So this research gets underfunded to approximately about 10% every year historically. And then when you add in the impact of the directed spending on priorities which were not in the original plan, this amounts to even 15% reduction over what the programmed or the planned program, as it is referred, what's in the president's budget and what NASA expects to do. The impact of this is that the ISRU technology is where the funding for technology that keeps humans alive on the moon for a long period of time, meaning more than a couple days than in a lander or perhaps a week. And so without this, the technologies needed to keep people on the moon for a long period of time will not be developed. Without that, you will not have the technology to keep people alive on Mars for a long term. So that's why this is an important item. It's the last one on there because there was some consternation about it, but it's really the one that we talked the most about. So anyway, what things look like on the slides is not always what happens. So what did we do? That how I mean there were successes. What happened? Well, we got an amendment off. We got Congressman Kevin Mullen to offer an amendment to a DOE NASA research and development authorization bill that specifically said that they could spend money to develop space solar power technologies. It's a small step. It's not a demonstration, but it's a step in the right direction. And that would not have happened without the sort of the groundwork that we laid in March Storm, and then some afterward follow-up from both Space Frontier and NSS. So we went to the Hill, we talked to people, we tried to find people who would actually support this idea, and this was what came out of that. So we've participated in the NASA has a Moon to Mars Architecture Working Group, which is essentially part of Artemis that develops, sort of fleshes out the down the road concepts of what to do, how to build infrastructure on the moon for the NASA version of long-term presence, which is up to 30 days on the moon. We've provided input there. We've tried to pursue the idea of space solar power as a mechanism to provide power on the moon. There's some argument that it would be easier to do that on the moon because you don't have to deal with beaming power to the through the atmosphere. So anyway, we've done that. We opposed last year the Spectrum Act. I couldn't figure out the number, what resolution it was, but it was a House resolution to make actually the allocation of spectrum for space launch or more easily allocatable. A byproduct of it is it would have codified, or in other words, it would have made very clear in the law that the FCC has the authority to regulate orbital debris. We opposed that mainly with Space Frontier Foundation. BEI was also opposed to it, but they don't really have an advocacy role because they're trying to just they're trying to be sort of a think tank that develops the ideas. But they had papers and views that opposed that, and so Space Frontier and NSS sent some letters about that, and in combination with some work from some other people on the Hill, this bill was defeated on the floor of the House, which is almost unprecedented. It was planned to slide through late in the evening with a motion to suspend the rules so that basically a group of bills could be passed under some House procedures without calling for a vote. And the motion to suspend the rules failed, so they couldn't pass the bill without calling for a full vote, and which they did, and then it didn't pass. So we were able to limit the FCC's regulatory authority in some degree. We participated in some National Space Council listening sessions, and then which they didn't really listen very much to, and then produced the policies guidance that they have for regulation of commercial space activities. So we tried, but they didn't listen. So what can you do? You just keep fighting, I guess. And then recently, I attended an event where we were working on requirements for a rapid characterization mission to be launched out to a near-Earth object to prepare, or sort of to practice the idea of what would be done if a large asteroid were seen that would potentially collide with the Earth. Fortunately, there are none that are known to be headed toward the Earth in the next, I think, 100 years is how far they plan out. But anyway, we never know. So that brings me to March Storm this year. How about that? So this year, our objectives look a little different. Why is that? So there was a question about why are we having sort of ratcheted down objectives? Perhaps there's an idea that we should be advocating for something more adventurous. Um, I'm sympathetic to that view, but the reality is that right now, nothing exciting is going to be passed in the Congress this year. Nothing, just like last year, nothing that costs money is going to be passed, and so you're only going to get as much money in various programs as you did last year, actually minus some money, so that's going to be another problem. But what is on the table is there is a bill introduced by Chairman Lucas in the House, which is called HR 6131, Commercial Space Act. That act would do things that are very important, like extending the learning period, establishing the Department of Commerce as the single authority to license commercial space activity, and increase and elevating that office to work for the Secretary of Commerce. So these are things that we've been fighting for, and NSS has had positions on for years. So this is the most important thing that we could accomplish by getting that bill passed. We would essentially be killing three birds with one stone, and there are other things in the bill that are very helpful. I think that it's going to be an uphill battle because there's just no interest in bipartisan anything bipartisan, it seems, but we don't know. So we're going to go to the Hill. The bill's been introduced. It's technically the same Congress, which is in session. So the bill is still out there. So maybe we can get some action on that bill. The other side of that is that in the Senate, there is some interest in a bill similar to this. There was a draft. It wasn't especially good one, but it didn't have a lot of good things in it. And now there's some pressure for someone to introduce a bill that coincides with the White House's or the National Space Council's draft proposal, which would cover many of the same topics. We don't care for that. It gives it gives basically all the authority for human space activity to the Department of Transportation and technically a AST, I suppose. And that's already a problem. They can't keep up with the work that they have now. Anyway, that has also been a long-term position, and so we oppose that. We don't want that to happen. We think that the Commercial Space Act is the better way to go. The second issue is that, as SpaceX sort of called out in a hearing, I guess at the end of last year, AST, the Office of Commercial Space Transportation, which is currently in the FAA, but is technically not in the FAA. It was never authorized to be in the FAA. It was just moved by executive order. That organization needs the resourcing to keep up with the increasing launch cadence that we are seeing. There are going to be more and more launches. There are going to be more and more reentries, and that is their function, to license those U.S. launches and reentries. And we believe they need more money to do. Well, they do need to do more money because they don't have the people to keep up with the workload, and that workload is going to get larger. So that is important. And we also think it would be best if that moved back to where it was and was not under the control of the FAA, because what they do is very different from regulating airliners and general aviation aircraft. And the final primary objective here is we want to get a study that looks at space solar power that is, well, let's just say that's more focused on the commercial reality of what space solar power could do. So would this be written in the Department of Commerce? But probably not, but it would be theirs to oversee, theoretically. And that's specifically needed because we're just not going to get money for any kind of space solar power demonstration this year. And so asking for that is a waste of our time. It's a waste of the time of the resources of people who come to March Storm, And it's going to be a waste of people's time who meet with us. And when they look at you, when you know that there is no opportunity to increase funding for some new program, and you come in and you ask for it, well, they're going to listen to you politely, but they're going to think, why are they wasting my time? These people don't know what the reality is in Congress. They don't know what the guidance is from the congressional leadership. So, I'm not really going to, how much am I going to really consider what they said later? Probably not very much. So what we think we can do is keep space solar power on the radar. We can continue to engage Congress on this issue. We can continue to be sort of the trusted people who they can turn to learn about space to when they say, well, what the heck is this, and why should I do this? So the reality is it's just not the right time to ask for money to do this, because well, it's the waste. I just said it's a waste of time for everybody, and it's an unfortunate truth. I'm good at speaking sometimes things people don't want to hear, and I imagine a lot of people don't want to hear that, but I don't want to waste my time. And this year, it would be a waste of time. So I've been on this seesaw back and forth about, should we be requesting a study, or should we be requesting a demonstration, for several years. And I can talk about this more in depth if somebody wants to discuss this, but it's a complicated issue, and this is probably the best we can do right now. So let's go on to the secondary objectives this year. And that is, there is another bill in Congress right now, the Orbits Act, introduced by Senator Hickenlooper from Colorado. He would like to get a demonstration technology, technology demonstration for mitigating orbital debris. So in other words, ways that debris that already exists can be deorbited or collected or repurposed. So this is something, orbital debris is an important priority. And so we want to make sure that everyone we talk to knows about this bill and knows that this should get passed. Will it get passed for $150 million? It's possible, but it's probably an uphill fight. But again, it keeps it on the radar of people on the Hill, and makes it, by keeping it on the burner, in a sense, if it doesn't pass this year, it has a better likelihood of passing next year than if it just sort of disappears, and dies a silent death. We're going to try to get money for ISRU in NASA again. We're going to just press the fact that NeoSurveyor still needs the funding to complete its construction and launch by 2027. And we mentioned a couple programs here. Commercial LEO destinations is important. The gateway is important. HLS is important. I guess I should mention, these are actually not final. These may get modified a little bit. We may not ask about the OSIRIS Apex. That was a request, but the amount of money in that mission is so small that we will probably not ask for it, because it's basically a rounding error for NASA. So those are our objectives for this year. So what can you do? You can sign up for a March Storm using this QR code. But let's not stop there, because there's more to talk about. Well, how can you help? Well, that's a great question. I'm glad that someone was thinking it. You can sign up for March Storm, as I might have mentioned. You can donate to support the NSS advocacy work that we do. Now, you can support both March Storm. You can offer support in two ways. Either through March Storm, through the registration link. You don't have to register, but you can support March Storm with a donation in support of that, or you can just support NSS itself. So you can contact your senators and representatives. Of course, as a citizen, you can do that anytime. It helps to do that at a time that is important, and that at a time that it will matter. So when a bill is being considered, when funding decisions are being made, those are the times. And one of the ways that you can know when that is to look for appeals from NSS. I would like to tell you that you can look in our new advocacy center, but we don't have one because, as I mentioned, our advocacy manager is currently vacant. So that is a reason that we are looking for somebody to do that. So that unfortunately set us a bit back from where we should have been at this point, but that's the best we can do. So if you know somebody who might be a good fit for that, or you yourself think that you would be a good fit for that, and what would be a good fit? Well, a good fit would be somebody who has some familiarity with online or cloud platforms, managing a mailing list, actually interest in space policy would be helpful. Um, um, that's all that comes to mind right now. There was a very nice job description posted. It's actually still on the NSS blog. I probably should have thought about putting a link to that here. But
John, sorry to interrupt. There was a question that was posted in both the chat and the Q&A about what does the term learning period mean? So I thought maybe you might
oh,
want to
sure. Thanks.
that.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so the learning period was established. So brief history. After the Astari X Prize that one of the Rutan brothers or both won with their um, spaceship One, that was subsequently purchased by Virgin Galactic. There was an idea that there would be many companies doing commercial human space launch. And the idea was that they did not want government regulation from the FAA to crush the burgeoning, growing businesses with incredible regulation that they could not meet because it still is inherently dangerous to some degree. I mean, there's some danger in it. And so there was a learning period established for 8 years from, I believe it was implemented in around 2007 or 2008, the bill that passed. And 8 years passed and there were no commercial human space launches. And another 8 years passed and there were still no commercial human space launches. And so it's been extended. I think it's been extended 3 times. I may be off on my math. Might have only been extended twice. Yeah, it's been extended. Well, not including last year, the most recent extension. And so the idea was that there would have been many flights that both the FAA and the companies doing the launches would have a better idea of what regulations should look like, because they shouldn't look like you're flying on a commercial airliner. It's a very different kind of activity flying into space. I mean, yeah, you still want it to be safe, but it's so anyway, that was the idea. And so there was another part that was basically informed consent. And so during this learning period, the idea was that there would be a limitation that the FAA could not regulate the safety of the human occupants, the participants, and that the participants would take part under an informed consent regime, which is a fancy way of saying they would be informed that what they were going to do was inherently dangerous, and that if something happened, they couldn't sue the company because because it was like an airliner crashed. So that is what the learning period is. And as I said, it's been extended a couple times. It just ran out. And again, how many commercial space launches have there been? I think that number is still less than 10. You have a handful of Blue Origin launches, and you have, I think, 3 Virgin Galactic commercial launches. So that is not enough. That is not the learning that was envisioned when that law was originally passed. So that brings me to the end, and so now I'm happy to answer other questions. It's a very excellent question.
Okay, thanks, John. Do you want to stop your sharing?
So get
Yep.
the QR code if you need it. This is your big chance. Or go to nss.org and look for the March Storm page, which I think is nss.org/March Storm, I think with a hyphen.
We can see if we can get that posted into the chat. So maybe.
Excellent idea.
Yeah. that'll work. So I want to just ask a few questions before we take some of our audience questions. You know, when I first got involved as a volunteer, I responded to a request for help for the NSS, and I always thought, oh boy, I wanted to be on the policy committee. That's the fun stuff. And of course, I ended up in membership, but I was able to shadow the policy committee, not as a voting member, and I was really impressed by the incredible knowledge that people had. I thought I was knowledgeable on space issues, but there really is a lot to know, as you just demonstrated in your presentation. You said there's an opening on the policy committee. What type of person are you looking for? And do they have to be an expert right now, or is that something they can learn on the job?
So you do not have to. So to be clear, there is an opening. There is a position vacant. There's actually a couple opportunities. Our orbital debris policy manager is not really active right now, and he's helpful for advice, but he's not able to dedicate the time basically because he got another job, but which is a challenge. But anyway, so there are several opportunities, and in fact, one of the reasons we have the policy leads that we do is because those were the policy issue. Those are the policy areas that were that needed somebody to look into them at a specific time, or that somebody wanted to look into at a given time. And so there are other issues that we would like to track, but we do not have the manpower to do that. We don't have anybody else to dedicate to other issues. People that are involved already have enough jobs. And so there is definitely an opportunity for people that want to get more involved in the policy area. It does help to have some idea of what's going on in the policy world. And so whether it's reading about policy issues, policy is very boring in many ways. But the reality is, I mean, people get paid an awful lot of money to be lobbyists because knowing what lobbyists know, they are much more effective because they know how the Hill works. And I mean, that's not what you have to do. What you really just have to do is know about a policy area, and you could become an expert in it. You don't have to have the expertise. Basically, if you have a passion for a specific area that is relevant to policy right now, that's the other issue. There are other opportunities, other places you could take your passion in at NSS. But yeah, definitely there are other opportunities. The advocacy manager itself is a unique one that we created, and we gave it a lot of thought. We wrote a job description. We did some interviews. We hired a great guy, and then he had to step away for personal reasons that were very unexpected and unfortunate. So that job is mainly that job is to be the person that coordinates. So we used to have the Political Action Network, which I guess technically still exists. It's going to be called the Space Action Network or something to that effect. And why is it different? Well, it's just different because we're going to get political out of it. It's not about being political. We don't want to have the baggage of partisan politics. We want to advocate for space-related issues and space development, space settlement, and commercial space activity, getting humans into space. That's what we want to do. And so we put a lot of effort into selecting a platform that will allow us to do that. And our advocacy manager was getting up to speed in that, and then when everything sort of fell apart. So that's the bottom line.
Very good. I want to start getting a few questions on March Storm while it's fresh, and then we can get back to some policy questions. But when someone signs up to do the March Storm, is there a training period? Are there materials to help them prep? What do they need to know in that sense?
Yeah, there sure are. So March Storm starts with a day. It's most of a day of training that will be in a venue, which I would like to tell you where it is, but I think it's going to be in it's going to be in a not hotel. It's going to be somewhere in DC, close to Pennsylvania Avenue, I think is where the two venues are. They're working out. So you get this day of training. The training is about how to engage on the Hill. It's about what you should say as far as representing ASD. It's about who is ASD. It's the people I just told you about. A little bit more detail. Tells you about the policy, the issues that we are advocating for. A little bit about why we're advocating for them. And it lets you meet some of the people that you will be in the meetings with. There are typically, last year, there were, as I recall, about 60 meetings, and most people were in about 60 meetings over 2 days. I think we had 30 some people. So there's typically anywhere between 2 and 5 people in a meeting, probably 2 to 4 people. And you typically will have 3 to 5 meeting. We really can't get 5 is really pushing it. You have about 4 meetings a day on the Hill. Meetings are about a half an hour in length. They are almost always with a staffer. Hopefully, they're with a staffer who has an actual um, its actual focus is on space policy, but sometimes they are not. Sometimes it's because they don't have, the person is new, they don't know it. So it's really just an opportunity to inform someone about space issues that in some cases they don't know about. It's really a mixed bag. Sometimes they're very new to issues. Other times the staffer knows more about one of the issues than you do because that's the senator or congressperson's, issue.
Right. You answered one of the questions that was submitted about who you meet, whether it's the elected official or it's predominantly the staffs. In terms of the elected officials you're targeting, is that done beforehand? Do you have a specific strategy with that, or is it also based on the people who are coming to March Storm and who is their specific elected representative or senator?
I'm sorry, what was the first part of that? Is it?
Well, yeah. Are you targeting specific
Yeah.
elected
Yeah.
officials?
So we only meet with, only is a strong word. So we meet with people who are the staff of senators and representatives who are on committees that will make a difference. And so
Okay.
those committees are generally the appropriations committees of the House and Senate, and the space. I will get the name wrong because I haven't looked at it. The science and technology in the House, and space and or sorry, no, that's right. Science and technology. No, it's the other way around. Science and technology in the Senate. No, anyway, anyway. Actually know what I'm talking about, but I don't
Yes.
right now. Anyway, those two committees are the places that you meet with, and so occasionally you might have a meeting with the professional staff from one of the committees as well. Frankly, that's the meeting I'm going to be in. I don't know. It depends who else needs to go to that meeting, but so of course we do. The first thing we do try to do is put people in meetings with their representative, but we will not meet with all the representatives, and we will, and unfortunately, because it's just not it's not what we, it's not how we can best use our time. It is more important for someone as a citizen advocate for space development to meet with somebody who is on the committee who can make a difference, a committee who can make a difference, than to meet with their own representative, which carries special weight when you're constituent. But if that constituent isn't on a committee and doesn't have an interest in space, then it's a waste of time. Now, having said that, if you're here and you're not going to have a meeting with somebody, with your own representative, you should and can call in advance. and talk with them. So, my representative here in Northern Virginia is Don Beyer, who used to be on the space committee but got kicked off. Well, let me just say he's not on the committee now. And so when I was on the Hill last year, I went to his office and chatted with his staffer, his new staffer Grace, and gave her a set of slides. And she was very interested in that because he has such an interest in space. So if you can even instill an interest in space development for a staffer from your that represents you, that's a plus. But that we're not scheduling that. We're scheduling the decision makers that we need to affect.
Right, right. Last question on the March storm. If people decide they'd like to do this, obviously travel and things are up to the person getting there. But what are typical expenses that they might incur? Is it just typically the travel expenses?
Yeah, it's your room and board, hotel or Airbnb, and your a little bit of money for transportation, for either metro or Uber, taxi, something, and often that can be shared. But the hotel is supposed to be on the metro, and everywhere that you're going to go is going to be available on the metro.
Great. So let's talk about some issues and
Mhm.
some additional things about the committee. I know you answered a lot of questions in
Mhm.
your descriptions. Someone did put into the Q&A about would you make your slides available? Could we send those out to people?
I guess I could do that. Yeah.
Or if you want to make a version that if you want to do that, we could do that as well.
Yeah, maybe you could send people. I mean, I don't. There's nothing. I mean, it's going to be public on the web. It's not that. I don't know what. Yeah, maybe we could chat about that
Okay.
afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. I want to just address a quick question that popped up from Brad, that it would be helpful to let NSS membership know which representatives you're targeting. Is that possible? Uh,
Um.
or it might not, maybe that's the side of the table.
Well, so if you go to the House website, I should look this up, but I can't think and type at the same time. So, um, if you look up the science committees, you'll see the people there, and if you see somebody, I mean, so the point is, if you volunteer, we're going to schedule you to have a meeting with somebody. So we need people to come so that we can represent ASD and NSS in these meetings. So I wish I could tell you who we're specifically targeting. But I mean, in general, it's all the people who are on it's technically the subcommittees of appropriations that deal with space issues. And so that's going to be CJS. I realize I appreciate this is somewhat wonky. I'm sorry, I didn't really prepare for that. It's a good question though. I will
Right.
have to try to figure it out.
Fred did post the link to the House, the science committees. So hopefully that'll help.
Yeah, and
Yep.
the Senate one is CST. I think it's Commerce, Science, and Technology Committee,
Okay.
and the appropriations as well.
Great. Oh, very good. If anyone does have any additional questions on the March storm itself, feel free to post them. We did get, you saw the QR code, and we'll get the link in there. So hopefully we can get a good group of people. I've never participated in March storm, but I've done this with my old organization, ASME, and
Oh
did
yeah.
several visits. So it was very interesting, as you said. It's very similar approach, training. And going with a small group and we did talk to mostly staffers, but it was a very fascinating experience. So I definitely encourage everybody to do it. It's a big help to NSS and to our vision for space. So let's get into some other questions that came in as people registered. And I know there was one that you really wanted to talk about. How does the lack of a new USA budget affect space activities and having only continuing resolutions in place of the new US budget? And as someone pointed out, the example of what the issues are at JPL, that they're laying off 8% of their staff, and that's obviously a significant impact.
Yeah, it's actually quite bad. And I mean, I think that this laying off of people at JPL, I mean, there are ways to look at issues, from both sides. But for a nation which finds itself in a race to the moon with China and to other places in space with China, um, I don't think that an environment where we're laying off a lot of, well, for lack of a better word, rocket scientists. I mean, they're not really all rockets. I mean, but they're scientists. They're space scientists. I don't think that's a great look, and I think that is strategically the wrong move. There are other issues in terms of the money that, there was a NASA IG report about JPL and the cost overruns and this and that. I mean, I think reality is we need to get. The reality is we're not really very good at managing programs on schedule and budget. I mean, I have given people the example of the bridge they built across the Potomac River or the giant mixing bowl down here. And these projects were over budget and behind schedule. So it's not unique to space. It's a challenge. But so that's what I think about JPL. The other problem, the other factor of JPL is that this is definitely a function of the fact that there is no budget. Because there is no budget, the continuing resolutions provide funding at a level that was essentially it's going to be slightly reduced now, because if they don't pass any budget, the ultimate amount that they can spend this year is less than that year, less than it was last year by a percentage that escapes me right now. I'm going to say it's about 2.5 or a percentage. So that will amount to a budget cut for everyone in the government and all the space activities. And so how will Artemis handle that? I don't know. It's going to be very challenging. What will that do to NEO Surveyor? What will it do to commercial LEO destinations? Well, the number one thing it will do is will delay all these things, because the program isn't going to end. NASA may have to slow or stop some exploration missions, but they're not going to stop Artemis. They're not going to stop NEO Surveyor because they were told to do it by Congress, but it's going to end up being a delay, and so it's not great. But let me see, where was I going with that? So the problem is, if there is no budget, the government programs, the government can't do things, even the things that we want them to do, like go to the moon, right? And that's going to be over budget, but it's going to be worse because now they can't obligate the money that was needed to make all the progress in this fiscal year. And so that means now they are behind for next year. And so that means their contractors can't do the things that they needed to do. Even if it came down, at some level, it could mean, well, we don't have the money to launch another space probe. I don't have SpaceX launch another mission, because there just isn't that much money. That much money is missing from the budget. That's just it's an arbitrary hypothetical example. But that's fundamentally the problem. It takes away the flexibility. And so so when I was in the government and I had in the Pentagon, I had to deal with a continuing resolution. You don't know how much money, you can't obligate your money because you're afraid you won't get the money that you should have gotten each quarter. And so everything is delayed and it snowballs until the end of the year. And most of the time in the past, a budget was finally passed. And so even though your progress on all the programs that you were trying to execute, everything was delayed, you could many times catch up by obligating more money to do something at the end of the year. This year, it's unlikely that that'll happen. It'll just be continuing resolutions. And because of the agreement that they had, that means they'll reduce they'll reduce the overall spending, again. So you're going to get, so suppose you're supposed to get $12 this year, you only had $10 last year. Now, each quarter, you're going to get $2.50, except that at the end of the year, you're going to find out, oh, well, I'm only going to get $1.50. And now I don't have as much money. I don't have the money I need to execute a whole quarter. Anyway, I'm
It's
not really the money guy, right? I'm the policy guy. So, but that's
it's a
basically
challenge.
what happens. It's a huge, and the other problem, and the most important thing is that, which is what happened in Neo Surveyor a couple of years ago. You cannot start a new program when there is a continuing resolution. So if the continuing resolution had come around when they wanted, well, this is a bad example. Let me rephrase that. Anything you want to start has to be authorized in the budget to be started. The continuing resolution only can continue funding that already exists. So if you want to, want to do a space solar power demonstration and fund it for $300 million or $150 million, you can't do it. It won't happen unless they pass a budget that authorizes that funding. So that is why there's nothing in our March Storm objectives that really is asking for money, at
Right.
least not money that someone else hasn't already asked for.
I see our COO, Dale Scran, has joined and he had raised his hand. Dale, did you want to comment on this question?
I just wanted to say what John got around to saying near the end, which is the most important thing is you can't start something new. And I think that, I mean, the John's explanation was fairly sophisticated. The simple way I would explain it is you can't start something new and you only have the money you had last year. Now, what John is getting
Or
at
less.
is you're going to get the less is like a modern variation based on a very recent deal. Traditionally,
well, it's actually
get
worse
what you
because your higher headquarters is not going to give you all of the money you got last year because they're going to hold it back because they're not sure what will happen. And so that uncertainty means that when you're at the
That's
level
true.
of paying a
Yes.
contract, you don't actually have all that money. And so what happens is sometimes the work can only be done at a certain time. And that means that some portion of that work is not going to be done, even if you get the money later. Anyway, sorry.
Yes, that's true. But that's only because of a recent change in the law, a very recent agreement. In the olden days,
it's actually
which was
worse.
just a few years ago, you could count on getting what you got the year before.
Yeah, yes, in theory at the departmental level, but what happens is in practice, the agencies will hold back some of the money. So you will not get all the money that you got.
Okay.
As the person who writes a check and manages a contract, you won't necessarily get all the money so if you're in STMD doing some contract with ISRU, you're going to be in a bad way. If you're managing Artemis, you're probably going to get the money that you needed that's available. As much as is available to you. So it varies.
Well, bottom line is it's bad.
It's not good.
It's
very
just
bad.
not good.
It's
Yes.
very bad, especially if you want to be in a race to the moon with China or anywhere.
It really makes it hard to accomplish the objectives that you want.
China has another advantage and that is that aside from the fact that there's no other party in China arguing that what they're doing is wrong, China directs what their national industries and companies do to a degree that we do not at all in this country. And so it's challenging. But anyway, let's move on to something else.
Yes, there was a question that was submitted, and then I also see one that was put into the chat from James. The question that was submitted talked about weapons in space and
Oh yeah.
and use of nuclear power, and then James's question is Putin's objective to place nukes in space violates the '67 Outer Space Treaty. What are your thoughts about this issue, and do you believe we as Americans have already violated this treaty ourselves?
Oh, okay. Well, I have to preface this by saying while I'm a policy professional, I am not a lawyer, so I don't have a legal opinion. But Yeah, so the Outer Space Treaty says you may not place weapons. What's the word? I don't think it says weapons of mass destruction. Basically, that's what it means. But you can't
Right.
place those weapons in nuclear weapons in space. Um, it- will weapons go? Okay. So it's this. What was the question exactly about the weapons? What's my view on this?
Well, yeah, it's more about your view on it. And you know, the one that was submitted really didn't have a question. It just said weapons in space and a question
Yeah.
mark. So,
Well, I don't. Okay. So there's two sides. First of all, I have a personal view about this. I don't think the NSS has a policy on this. So what I say is is just my thoughts on it. I think weapons in space are generally a bad idea because space is a hard enough place to live in, and weapons will just make that more difficult because well, look, I mean, the weapons we have are mostly weapons we're good at are kinetic weapons, and using any kind of kinetic weapon in space is going to generate a ton of debris. So I'm told, I think that I'm told that the Russians on their first space station tested uh, firing some kind of machine gun in space. Um, I wish I had a source for that, but I don't. But I'm told that that happened. And it was like, well, that was interesting, but that's bad news. I don't. I mean, if we get to that world, it's going to be very, very unpleasant in space. Now, I mean, I think if you talk to the Space Force, they're going to tell you that what they want to do is be in space to protect U.S. interests out there and U.S. companies and U.S. people when they're in space, and they want to provide a rescue capability. Will they have weapons? I don't know. Military people don't tend to go anywhere without some kind of a weapon. But on the other hand, everything in space is essentially a weapon because of its kinetic energy. So if you have a satellite, even a CubeSat, and it can maneuver, that can be a weapon. You could maneuver that, within the realm of orbits and how much fuel it has. And I mean that thing hitting another spacecraft would be, that would destroy it, assuming it could hit it. So I don't know. I mean, look at DART. DART is essentially a weapon. We impacted an asteroid with an extremely fast kinetic impactor, and that caused a significant amount of damage to the asteroid. So I think that's all I can say about this. I don't really want to see the weaponization of space. There's some argument that about militarizing. I mean, the military is already in space with spy satellites, that kind of observation and remote sensing and communications. I don't know. It's a sticky issue.
Dale, I saw your hand up. Did you want to add to that? And
Yeah, there's 2 points I want to add. What the Outer Space Treaty bans nuclear weapons, it also bans fortifications and maneuvers on the moon, things like that. So there's a number of prohibitions, but it doesn't actually ban weapons in space.
Right.
So, and in fact, they think pistols and such have been carried to the space station. So and as John says, everything is a weapon. Any kinetic, fast-moving vehicle is a weapon. If you use it, rocket exhaust is a weapon. You can go on and on.
Railgun. I mean, the same thing that accelerates your resources off of the moon could be
Railguns are
accelerating
good
a
weapons.
mass into some other body in space.
The other thing I want to say is that you mentioned the cannon. That's a fascinating story. It was relatively recently declassified. The story is that this was in the day in which the Air Force was considering building the so-called manned orbiting laboratory, and the president, who I believe was Johnson at the time, or maybe it was Nixon.
Might have been Eisenhower. No, it wasn't.
No, not Eisenhower. This was way after Eisenhower's time. It was a Soyuz. It was an Alvarez station. They actually had, I wouldn't call it a machine gun. It was more like a cannon. And they did test it once with no astronauts on board. It's not clear that it was terribly useful as a weapon system. The U.S. knew about it. And the U.S., it was like the most deeply classified thing because, and I believe it was Johnson, was terrified that would get out in the press, and the U.S., he would feel politically compelled to put similar weapons in orbit and sort of start an arms race in space. And he did not want to do that. He wanted to switch over to all robotic spy satellites. And the Russians actually had a crew taking pictures, and they thought they might need a cannon to defend their reconnaissance work. So he just ignored it, and they ignored it completely. The Russians decided it was a bad idea, and eventually everybody started doing robots, and the cannon was not a very useful weapon. Over. Anyway, it's all on the internet. It's all been declassified. Over.
Very good.
Yeah, thanks.
We are a little bit over time. I'd like to go, if we can, at least another 5 or 10 minutes, John, if that's good with you, to get a few of the other questions that were submitted. And I see there was an interesting one from Jeffrey about, apart from budget matters, how partisan or nonpartisan is Congress with respect to space matters?
Yeah, remarkably unpartisan. There's been a long history of the Republicans and Democrats working together on the in the House committees, Space and Science Committee, subcommittee rather, of CJS. Anyway, so they've done they do that very well. That's why it was very surprising to see Don Beyer not on the committee as the ranking member this past year. Other issues are in there, and so even when they can come to agreement, the problem is the overall tenor that is more about not more about tearing down government than to making progress. And I don't know. Anyway, I don't know what to say about that.
Right. Okay. Let me get a couple other questions here. And this is an interesting one. Does the NSS shy away from controversial issues? So,
well,
that's
question. An interesting question. Sometimes, yeah, sometimes we do. Much as Dale told us, Johnson did. It's doesn't always benefit us to weigh in on something immediately. There are controversial. So there's two reasons to not do that. To weigh, to shy away, I guess, if that was the question.
Yeah.
One is that there's no benefit to engaging on the issue. So one of the problems is that the people that run the space programs in the United States are in the executive branch. They're not in Congress. Congress just authorizes and funds them. I mean, they would say their role is much more. But anyway, if we're always at war with these organizations, then it's not likely they're going to listen to us. And I don't listen to people that shout at me all the time. I mean, it just like makes me, gives me jitters. I'm like, I don't want to listen to this anymore. But so I think it's important to work with organizations. Maybe I'm not really answering the right question. I did write down a note. So there's another reason that we may not weigh in on controversial issues is that NSS would have to have an agreement about. There has to be an agreement. If it's a policy issue, then we just need to have a vote and come to an agreement. And usually we don't have a vote until there's likely an agreement. And so if there is not a consensus on what to do about the issue, then you might not take action.
Right.
And sometimes, so not just the function of maybe calling out NASA about everything, but you might not want to be engaged on a controversial, you might shy away from something because you are trying to get something else done. And that isn't going to help. It's going to detract from what you're really trying to accomplish that, is very close. But if you alienate the wrong people, now you can't achieve your goal. So there's definitely an aspect of chess to the policy engagement.
Right.
Policy is not the leading edge of, the most zealous positions because they're probably not going to be adopted. And I believe that it's important to accomplish so there's a theory of change which many nonprofits use, and so suppose that you want to solve world hunger and you don't want there to be any hungry people in the world. Well, you might just start getting money and you might start sending food out to people that are hungry, but you probably can't feed the world that way. That's not, I mean, you're going to make a difference in the people that get food, but you're not really going to fix the problem. And so what you want to do is set the conditions that will lead to the future that you want to see. And so if you want to see people living in a space station at L5 or on the moon or on Mars, you need to set the conditions to get there. And that means you've got to make sure that NASA has the resources and the desire to maintain, to be able to maintain a long-term presence on the moon as a stepping stone to Mars. I mean, I know a lot of people would like to go to Mars right away and not go to the moon, but we don't have life support systems that will take you to the moon. I mean, you can tell me it's theoretically we have all this, things that work, but we don't have them. They don't exist. And the International Space Station, something breaks, they send it up. It comes in a couple days if it has to, absolutely has to. But that's not even really that quick. Something has to get to the moon. Now you got to launch a rocket that takes 3 days just to get there, and you got to have a rocket, and you got to have all the equipment, and you got to have everything, and you got to be install it. That's a real problem. On Mars, you don't send anything to fix anything. That's at least not in the near term. You have what you have, and so your life support system better not break, or you better have a backup, and then the backup better not break. Anyway, just as an example, everything has to work when you're out that far. That's why it is so important to go to the moon and build a base, have people live there, gain experience at living somewhere other than on the Earth, because we just really don't. I mean, yeah, it's one of the things the ISS has done is it's given us experience doing that, but we don't have people other than the ISS and now the Chinese space station living in space, and that's low Earth orbit is a lot nicer to you than being on the moon in many regards, or somewhere else in space.
Right. Last question, because I know we're running a little late at this point. Well, how does the NSS disseminate these positions and the policies we take, the policy positions we take?
That's a great question. Which I hate to say. I hate saying it's a great question because usually that means somebody's going to now talk about something else, that they're going to talk to their talking points instead of that. But I will tell you that the papers. So how are they disseminated? Well, they're disseminated in a couple of ways, and like the primary way is as a paper or a statement that is on the NSS website under the policy committee. I actually don't know where it is on the new website. It used to be easy. It used to look bad, but it was easy to find. And now I'm not exactly sure what the URL is, but I assure you that you can find it on the website. Now, that's not the only way to do it. We also do it through letters that we send to Congress. We do it through editorials that we might publish in other forums that advocate our position. What I think they're saying is, how does a member find out about it? And I'm sorry, we don't have a very good way of doing that right now. Frankly, that is one of the things that we need an advocacy manager to lead, is that communication. It's the reason that I wanted that position created, because I can't do it. I don't have enough time. I mean, I can't meet with people in Washington. I mean, so in the last month, I have been to half a dozen. Well, that's not. I've been to in this month alone. I've been to 4 events here, breakfasts, NASA's NASA. It wasn't really a workshop, but it was sort of a workshop. Other events. I mean, one of the questions was, how do we work? How do we deal with other organizations? And that's like networking here is very important.
Right.
It's one of the true things about on the Hill. relationships matter. And if you know a staffer or, you know, a member, you know, who they know is who they listen to. And we're in the process of trying to become, you know, trusted people that the staffers will listen to, you know, that they would even, you know, that they'll pay attention to in a sense, because there's a lot of people walking around, you know, saying things. And we're up against, you know, people with big pockets. I mean, some of the other advocacy organizations are very well funded because they represent companies and we don't represent companies. So we represent citizens that want to see a human future in a human future in space. There we go. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
So that's the deal.
Very
Anyway,
good.
so I'd like to do that. It's on the agenda. If only I had like 3 people you know, to interview for the advocacy manager.
Fred did post the link for our position papers, so that is in the chat, everybody. And I know there was a comment in the chat about being able to copy things. I can assure you we did not disable that ability. Maybe we just
Yeah,
didn't
it's
turn it on.
wonky.
Yeah, so
Um,
we're gonna. I see Fred said we're gonna check into that. So everybody, but we do download the chat.
well,
So
that's weird. I can copy it.
maybe because you are a panelist, it's
Oh,
possible.
maybe. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe so.
So
Yeah,
we're gonna check
Zoom is a
into
little
that.
wonky about.
But if you do see a link there, just select the link and then bookmark that link, so you have that. But we also, everybody, if something big comes up, we do post it in the blog. So sign up for the NSS blog if you haven't done that, and that's a good way to keep up with any position papers or things like that that are brand new. So. Let me just get one last question, if it's okay, John, because I
Sure.
pulled this one from Brad because it touches on what you mentioned. But do the examples of SpaceX, et cetera, suggest to John that NASA is not really the future of space exploration and commercialization? I don't know if you were implying that, but just like to get your thoughts.
Are you asking whether I was implying that?
Well, it says, I'll read it again. Do the examples of SpaceX, et cetera, suggest to John that NASA is not really the future of space exploration and commercialization?
Um, well, I see what Dale wrote there. I mean, I agree. So eventually, so you see already, NASA has been. I'm sorry, SpaceX is much more um, um, able. You know, they have made incredible progress with launching rockets in a way that has never been done before, and that's because of their commercial approach, and it's because they've been innovative and they have been, you know, untethered from um, traditional ways of doing things. Um, but so I think the answer is yes, they will eventually be more. Um, they'll be. Will they be bigger? I mean, I guess probably. Um, but so one of the things that we talk about, you know, with companies operating on the moon is that, you know, there isn't any the funding for missions on the moon, with some exceptions, a few exceptions, is predominantly going to come from governments
Right.
for the next, I don't know, near to midterm. Companies are not planning on doing, you know, like having people live on the moon. NASA can't do that yet. So I mean, it's like there is not a demand for people to come live on the moon at this point. And so it's really a supply, you know, I mean, even if there might be a supply of people that would like to go live on the moon, but they don't have the ability to do it. There's no technology. So what I think is going to happen is government is going to cede. I mean, you know, and the other thing is to remember is that I mean, as phenomenally successful as SpaceX is, they are only able to do this because NASA funded their R&D their seeded the ability to build the Falcon 9 and the Crew Dragon, first the Cargo Dragon and then the Crew Dragon,
Right.
and then bought it as a service. Um, was that a good investment? It's a fantastic investment. I'm sure that they've made their money back over many times over in the reduced launch costs to ISS, reduced launch costs for space missions as well. So it's a great investment. And I think that's a good model to have, where the government funds things that are out there that there's no commercial case for. And, I mean, Elon Musk aside, there isn't, I mean, I don't see a commercial case right now to be going to the Mars, because there's so much risk in that. It's already an issue. I mean, what's funny is that the CEO of Airbus just made some remarks about some unexpected, very large charges in his space division that led to their financial results not being as good last quarter as they would have been otherwise. And this is all seen as sort of putting the space sector on notice that they're not, going to have blank checks and all this stuff. Well, I mean, I don't know how that makes Voyager Space feel. They're Airbus's partner in the Starlab venture that's going to put, they says they're going to put the first, well, Axiom has a space, but a very early commercial space station up there. So I don't know what that means, but space is very risky. And I know that there is a problem in insuring satellites, because the Viasat launched a satellite into geostationary orbit. I think it's the most expensive communications satellite that was ever launched. It had actuators on it that were supposed to deploy antennas, very much like JWST, very similar actuators. Those actuators didn't work. And so this, I don't remember how much it was, a really very expensive satellite only has 10% of the communications capacity that it's supposed to have. As a result, it is becoming very difficult to get insurance for a commercial company to put a spacecraft out there. So the amount of risk that space companies face makes investment in them look, I think, much less palatable to many investors.
Very
So
good.
I sort of answered.
Yep. And everyone, I will point out that Dale added a comment about that in the chat as well. So you might want to take a look at that. Everybody, we will take a look at this issue with the chat. The chat is open to everybody. That's the setting is on that now. So you can respond to everybody with chat. But we'll take a look at the copy issue. But someone also suggested making a screenshot. That works too.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, John, I think we're way over.
I should say I'm happy to answer any questions that people have in my official email, which I actually read most of.
Okay. Did you want to put that into the chat, your email?
Oh yeah, sure. I can. It was on the slide somewhere back there. But
Yeah, let's just put that in the chat, or I can send that out with everybody if we do send the slides out. So we can do that. So I just want to thank you, John, for taking the time. I know you made a comment about sometimes policy can be boring, but actually talking about it is not. It's a very, very interesting topic. There are just so many issues that we could cover and talk about for quite a while. So I thank you so much for putting everything together, for taking the time out, and for being willing to answer questions from people via your email. So thank you again. We hope to have you back again in the future. And I'd also like to thank, of course, our CEO, Anita Gale, for joining us tonight. Anita, any final comments?
No, it's a good night. Thank you very much, John. Great job.
Thank you.
And yep, thank you. And Dale, any final comments from you?
No, this is great. I just use that QR code and come to March Storm. Your time will be well spent. I think anybody who's ever gone there, the training's
You learn
great.
a lot.
You learn a lot. You'll really make a difference. And this is not. It cannot be done by lobbyists. Only citizens can be citizens. Once you're paid, you lose a lot of credibility. Everybody listening to this call who's not paid, which is, I think, pretty much all of us, our credibility is greater because we don't work for Boeing or SpaceX. So come, and I'll see you there. Bye.
And if you take a look at the chat, Bob put in a comment there. I participated in 2018 and 2019 March Storms, and they were fascinating, fun, and worthwhile experiences. So there you go, a great endorsement. So with that, I do want to close out tonight. We went a little bit over. As always, I know Larry's not on tonight, but I want to thank my colleague Larry Ahern for his support on all of our town halls and space forums. And of course, Fred Becker, who is always with us. Thank you, Fred, for all the technical support you provide. So let me share my screen one last time as we close out, everybody. And let's just do this now. Here we go. So as we close out tonight, I always like to say to everybody, thank you for joining. We really appreciate your support and your participation in these space forums and town halls. If you are in today's time zone, have a great evening. If you are in tomorrow's time zones, have a great day ahead. And of course, have a great weekend. Stay safe. We'll see you again on March 7th to hear from Jim Plaxco, who is actually on the call tonight. So Jim, we're looking forward to having your discussion about the eclipse, and which will take place again on April 8th. And we'll hope to fill out the rest of the schedule that we'll share with you the next time around. So everyone, wishing you a great evening again, and we'll see you next month. Take care.